Greetings, Fire Chargers, Darkblade here, and in today's installment of Reaction Week, I will be reacting to The Truth Behind Arabic's Rarest Sound uploaded by August 21st by Human1011. This is day 3 of Reaction Week, and this is take 3 of this video. I want to get some things out of the way. First, I have basically only one source for all my knowledge of Arabic. Duolingo is a source of basically 90-something%. I have seen other stuff like this slang focused video, but almost everything that I currently know comes from Duolingo. So I am not claiming to know more about Arabic or linguistics than Human1011 does. Second, a lot of the comments objecting to this to his video seem to miss the point. His video is about the Arabic letter dod and a hypothesized earlier original pronunciation and phonetic value. He does not really bring religion into this video. In the Islamic religion, there is a big emphasis put on reciting and pronouncing the Quran in Arabic in a very specific way. This video isn't about that. It's just about historical linguistics and phonology for this one specific letter. With that out of the way, let's begin the video.
If you've ever spoken about Arabic to a native speaker, then you may have heard that Arabic is known as Lughat al-Bad, or the language of Bad. Bad is one of the letters of the Arabic alphabet, making a particularly rare sound. B. That's like the letter D, but
it's not just a rare sound, it's also one that's generally hard to pronounce, hard to make. I think even in Human1011's own video here, he makes a the sound a couple of times instead.
Emphatic, with a constriction in your throat. In fact, the sound's rarity is why Arabic has been known as the language of Bad for over 1,000 years. It's the only language in the whole world with that sound, Bad. At least, that's what a lot of people will tell you, but there's just one problem. It's not true. The sound the actually exists in a bunch of different languages. We can see it in other Semitic languages, like in Mahri. We can see it in other Amazigh languages. And we can even see it in languages that are completely unrelated to Arabic. Now, we could chalk this up to ignorance. Classical...
There might be some fundamentalists who are triggered by mention of the fact that there are languages genetically unrelated to Arabic.
Arabic was spoken over 1,000 years ago. So, of course, a young Islamic empire couldn't have known about all the small languages spoken on the edge of their territory. But there's actually an alternate explanation. What if Bad wasn't always pronounced as B? What if it had an older, rarer pronunciation
and potentially harder to make?
I mean, think about it. We know that languages evolve their pronunciations all the time. The German W used to be a W sound, but is now a V sound. The French H used to be pronounced, but has now fallen silent. And the English R, R, well, in Middle English, it was actually a trilled R.
In fact, there are actually two types of French H that I got from, according to a video on the history of French that I watched from Native-Lang. There is the original indigenous H that was inherited from Latin, and then there was a later H that was inserted from Germanic, that was inserted during the Frankish times.
So what if
even Arabic has undergone certain sound changes? For example, the letter Jim currently makes the J sound in modern standard Arabic, which is a voice postalveolar affricate, which is a coronal sound. However, Jim is not a sun letter in modern standard Arabic, even though the sun letters are supposed to be all the coronal sounds and the moon letters are supposed to be all the non-coronal sounds. This indicates that Jim originally had a more non-coronal pronunciation. Human1011 even gets into this in his community post response to Arabic 101's video response to this video.
Bad actually had an older, rarer
harder to make.
that actually made Arabic truly worthy of the title language of Bawd.
That's
it's
the
certainly
setup.
possible, but how could we even know? I mean, it's not like we have audio recordings from 1,000 years ago. Believe it or not, linguists have a ton of techniques at their disposal for reconstructing the sounds of old languages.
Okay.
So using these techniques, we can actually make an educated guess as to how Bawd used to be pronounced. One method to figure out a letter's pronunciation is to compare it to other related languages.
I'm not
Arabic
sure I'll
is
be
a Semitic
on
language,
board
which
with
makes
this.
it related to languages like Aramaic, Hebrew, Ge'ez, and others. This means we can look at related words in these languages and see how they are pronounced to maybe get a clue as to how Bawd was pronounced.
Yeah, I'm not going to be all that on board
example,
with this.
which means earth or ground. We can see this word's cognates across the Semitic languages. There's Hebrew Eretz, there's Syriac Ara, there's Shahri Esh, and many others.
All of those are right. Those are cognates to the Arabic word.
I don't speak any of these languages. Notice how the Arabic Bawd corresponds to completely different sounds in all of these other languages.
Commonly
we can repeat this process with other words that have cognates in the Semitic languages to build a corresponding chart to see how other Semitic languages pronounce their version of Bawd. Notice the types of letters that all the other languages use. They're all fricatives. That is to say, consonants that are made with a constriction of the airflow, making a distinctive hissing sound, like s, z, sh, etc. Contrast that with the Arabic sound,
this is
bad. Which is a plosive.
16
it has complete
minutes
closure of airflow. Every other Semitic language has some sort of fricative,
2.5
except for Arabic. That might suggest that Bawd was originally a fricative sound in classical Arabic.
Okay, I'm gonna stop him. I don't think this is all that good of a methodology for the purpose that he's using it. If he were to use it to hypothesize a Proto-Semitic ancestor sound, I might be more on board with this, but he's using this to suggest a pronunciation in ancient or early medieval Arabic, which I don't think is all that good. For example, the English word horn begins with an H sound, h, which is a glottal fricative. However, if we look at Indo-European cognates, like Greek keras, meaning horn, or Latin cornu, meaning horn, or Welsh carn, even though horn isn't listed as one of the sections on Wiktionary, they all begin with k, voiceless velar plosive. If one were to use this data to suggest that the original Proto-Indo-European pronunciation included ancestor language pronunciation included a plosive, voiceless, velar plosive cut sound, then I would be more on board with that. However, I wouldn't be on board with that if someone were to use this same data to claim that the original pronunciation in English itself was a k sound. I think you need something more directly connected to Arabic for that.
Another useful tool we can use is comparing loanwords. Every single language has a different phonology or sound system. So when one language borrows a sound from another language, it has to adapt those sounds into the language's phonology. And the way in which that language adapts those words can give us a clue into the language's pronunciation. Take the following words from Japanese, for example, biru and biru, which are both loanwords from European languages. Since both these words contain the same consonants, B and R, we might expect them to come from European words that also have these consonants. However, these two words come from the English word bill and the Dutch word bier, respectively. That means that Japanese speakers loaned L and R into the same character. This might suggest that to Japanese speakers, they might not have heard a meaningful difference between the L sound and the R sound. And sure enough, in Japanese, the sounds R and L are considered two different forms of the same consonant. So what does Bawd look like when it's loaned into other languages? Well, let's take Spanish as an example. Due to the Muslim conquest of Spain, Arabic ended up having a lasting impact on Spanish. Let's take the Spanish term alcalde, for example, which means mayor. This comes from the Arabic word el qadi, which means the judge. But notice the discrepancy between the Arabic term and the Spanish term. Where Arabic had a b, Spanish writes both an L and a D. And this isn't just a random example.
In fact, check these connections on
Arabic terms with
take 2.
loaned with an L and a D.
This
might suggest that the Spaniards weren't hearing Bawd as a b sound, but instead of some sort of mix of an L and a D. And we see this pattern play out in plenty.
I think for this you should also take into account the old or early middle Spanish pronunciation, which might be different from the modern phonology, though I wouldn't know.
Of other languages. Take, for example, Ramadan, the Muslim month of fasting. This comes from the Arabic term Ramadan, which has that Bawd sound in the middle of it. Because of how widespread Islam is as a religion, plenty of languages around the world have borrowed this word into their vocabulary, but many languages did it differently. Languages that borrowed the word more recently typically transcribed it with a D. However, languages that borrowed the term earlier in Arabic's history typically have some sort of L sound in there. This is
And
really
Arabic and Persian has a Z. Literally, this letter dod makes a Z sound in Persian. And if these were languages that borrowed it earlier, you should also consider the potential for what their earlier pronunciations were. I don't know if he's done that.
Evidence to suggest that bod originally had more of an L articulation in classical Arabic. Arabic
Okay,
is an awesome language that I think more people should learn. But learning a new language isn't just using apps for 5 minutes a day. In my opinion, you really need to take language learning courses, but that's easier said than done. Not everyone has access to an institution to teach Arabic. And if they do, they probably teach modern standard Arabic, which isn't even a variety that native speakers use in conversation. Now that's where Lingua Verna comes in. They teach online courses in Levantine Arabic, and all the classes are led by a native Arabic speaker. Plus, their class times are super flexible, so they can accommodate your busy schedule. They have
I'm
hours
skipping
of quality content
past
available
this sponsor ad.
Plus, each of their videos has a detailed transcript with extensive annotations to make sure you understand all the minutiae and context behind certain phrases and idioms. Taking Arabic classes was an eye-opening experience for me. There were so many different features of Arabic that I didn't even realize were possible in any language. Not only did I fall in love with Arabic, but it got me interested in linguistics in the first place. In fact, this YouTube channel probably wouldn't exist if I'd never taken Arabic classes. Lingua Verna guarantees a full refund if you attend a few classes and decide it's not for you. So there's no reason not to sign up. Plus, if you sign up using the link in the description, then you'll get 20% off your purchase and exclusive access to content that I wouldn't otherwise show here on YouTube. Thank you so much to Lingua Verna for sponsoring this video. And without further ado, so far we've seen lots of circumstantial evidence to suggest that bod used to have an alternate pronunciation. But we haven't really answered our question. How exactly was bod pronounced? How could we even know what something was pronounced like over 1,000 years ago? Well, what if I told you that people from over 1,000 years ago told us exactly how to pronounce bod? One of the most useful ways of figuring out the phonology of old languages is to see if any grammarians or scholars of the time actually wrote about pronunciation. Thankfully for us, the Arabic linguistic...
In fact, the ancient Chinese scholars said stuff about Chinese pronunciations, but apparently that didn't turn out to be all that. Some sources say those old Chinese resources weren't exactly all that useful for providing information. I don't know what I just said.
Tradition is very substantial, and there are a number of scholars that told us exactly how to pronounce each letter. Let's start with Yusuf as-Sakaki, a famous Muslim scholar who lived nearly a millennium ago. He actually produced the earliest known vocal tract diagram, which tells you exactly where in the mouth each letter is supposed to be pronounced. Here it is. This diagram is...
So here we have ta or tha, or this is ta, dal, thal, and I think this is the letter ta. And dod appears to be back here. I think these are the teeth. This is the tip, and
to represent a profile view of the vocal tract. The opening of the mouth is on the left, and the back of the throat is on the right. You'll notice that all over this diagram are a number of Arabic letters, which each letter being placed according to where in the mouth it's pronounced. For example, the letters w, th, m, and b are all labial consonants. They're pronounced with at least one of the lips. And sure enough, if you look at the diagram, all of those are in the same spot, the front of the mouth. Meanwhile, the guttural, throaty sounds like ha and ah are all at the back of the vocal tract. So where is bod? You might expect to find it near the tip of the tongue. That's where the letter D is pronounced after all. And sure enough, if you look at the vocal tract diagram, you'll find the letter D and the letter T right there near the tip of the tongue. But that's not where you find bod. Instead, bod is all the way at the back of the tongue, near the roof of the mouth. This is like no other letter in the diagram. It seems to be some sort of sound that requires a raised and back tongue.
So maybe velar or uvular? I'm not. Let me get an IPA chart. And pause my screen recorder to avoid it running for too much. Yeah, the pulmonic consonants, the place of articulation is arranged left to right from front to back of the mouth. It goes bilabial, labiodental, lingual, labial, dental alveolar, postalveolar, retroflex, palatal, velar, uvular, pharyngeal, and glottal. And with each shift to each rightward column, the place where the sound comes from should be farther back. So if we're talking about the far back in the mouth, then it should be velar or uvular or pharyngeal.
Now, this is helpful information for sure, but it doesn't really give us a conclusive answer as to how bald is pronounced. However, there is one other linguist who tells us exactly how bald should be pronounced. The history of grammarians discussing the phonology of Arabic is extensive, and owes in large part its origins to a single work, the Kitab, by Persian grammarian Sibawayh. It's hard to overstate just how monumental of a figure Sibawayh was. He's been called the father of Arabic linguistics and one of the most important linguists of all time. And his book, The Kitab, is a seminal work in Arabic linguistics. Now, most of the Kitab is dedicated to stuff like grammar, syntax, morphology, etc. But there is an entire section on phonology, in which he tells us exactly how to pronounce every single letter in Arabic. But first, let's talk a little bit about phonetics. There are a number of different phonetic categories a sound can be placed into. For example, there's place of articulation, which is where in the mouth the word is pronounced. A sound could be bilabial, pronounced with both of the lips, like p, b, and m. Or a sound could be alveolar, pronounced with the tongue at the ridge behind the front teeth, like s, t, and n, among others. Or it could be a number of other places of articulation too. Another phonetic category, velar, pronounced with the tongue at the ridge behind the front teeth, like s, t, and n, among others. Or it could be a number of other places of articulation too. Another phonetic category is the manner of articulation, which is the way in which the sound is produced. So a word could be applosive, which means complete closure of the airflow, like p, t, or k. Or a sound could be a fricative, which involves pushing air through a narrow opening, creating friction, like f, s, sh. Or it could be a number of different manners of articulation. Now, there are other phonetic categories, but these are the only ones we really need to concern ourselves with today. You see, all this phonetic classification stuff, it's a modern invention, not even 150 years old. Sibawayh lived in the 8th century CE, over 1,000 years before the International Phonetic Alphabet was even conceived of. And yet, Sibawayh actually created a phonetic classification system of his own, with remarkable detail. So what does Sibawayh say about bald? Well, let's start with place of articulation. We've already seen plenty of evidence to suggest that bald was pronounced somewhere other than the tip of the tongue. And sure enough, Sibawayh agrees. He writes instead that bald is pronounced, quote, between the first part of the side of the tongue and the adjacent molars. That's weird, right? The side of the tongue hitting the adjacent molars, that's almost like the letter Y. Yeah. Now, in modern Arabic, bald involves complete closure of the vocal tract, so it's definitely applosive. However, Sibawayh writes, quote, among the limp consonants, the fricatives, are, among others, the bald. He's telling us explicitly
in shin, sod, and zai, which are fricatives and specifically sibilants in modern Arabic.
But bald is not applosive. It's instead classified with all the other fricative consonants. So putting all of this evidence together, can we make an educated guess for the pronunciation of bald? We know the sound is likely a fricative, or had a fricative-like quality to it. We also know the sound probably sounded something like an L, which suggests a lateral quality, which is when sound is expelled on either side of the tongue. The articulation seemed to be further back in the mouth, with the tongue slightly raised. We also know the sound was voiced and emphatic, like the modern bald, which is corroborated by Sibawayh. Using all of this evidence, a number of different proposals have been put forward for bald's classical pronunciation. Take this sound, for example, blah, which is a combination of emphatic D and emphatic L. This would explain some of those weird transcriptions into other languages that we saw earlier. Other proposals, like ja, seem to better fit the evidence that bald was a pure fricative. However, the proposal that I subscribe to, as do most experts in the field, is this sound, ja. That's a...
So, I'll pause this.
Pharyngalized, voiced, alveolar, lateral fricative. Boy, is that a mouthful. It fits a lot of the criteria.
Yeah, so checks out. This is indeed reconstructed to be the ancient pronunciation of Dod per the Wikipedia article on this phoneme.
We were looking for earlier. It's a fricative, for one, which we saw tons of evidence for, and it's also a lateral sound, which is suggested by Sibawayh. Plus, it requires a tensing of the tongue, which fits that vocal tract diagram we saw earlier. But the strongest...
But alveolars are made near the front, not the back. Oh...
piece of evidence of ja being the classical pronunciation, in my opinion, is that that sound actually still exists in Arabic. In the southern parts of the Arabian Peninsula, there are a number of different dialects that are famous for retaining traditional features of Arabic linguistics. And in the Asir province of Saudi Arabia exists the Tihami Qahtani tribe, which reportedly pronounces bald as ja, just as it presumably was pronounced over 1,000 years ago. So that is why so many and in the Asir province of Saudi Arabia exists the Tihami Qahtani tribe, which reportedly pronounces Bod as Za, just as it presumably was pronounced over 1,000 years ago.
Za. Does that sound similar to what he said this phoneme was?
So that is why so many linguists
phonetization is hard to do.
During the classical period, before eventually evolving into the modern Ba. And guess what? That would finally make Arabic truly worthy of the title language of Bod, because it would be the only language in the world with the sound Ra. Is what I really wish I could say, except it does exist in at least one other language, Mahdi, but close enough. Hey guys, this is my first attempt at making real long-form content.
So anyway, that is the video. Make sure to like and subscribe both to me and to the original Human1011 video. And remember that his video was not about religion or how to properly pronounce the Quran. This video was about historical linguistics and phonology. With all that said, I'll see you tomorrow. Dark Blade out.